Okay. We are going to start off by letting you all know this session is recorded. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Friends of the Ashland Library and Romancing New England and Aesop Stable, who's doing all the fabulous book sales outside. So we have a wonderful trio of authors here to talk to you today. And I'll start with having you guys tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your latest project. So we'll start with Sandra right now.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, good morning and welcome to all of you. It's really nice to see such a great turnout after the last couple of years of isolation. And many thanks to Ashland Library for inviting me to participate. And to Nina, your very enthusiastic library director. She is like, yay. Very happy about that. I've been writing for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, I look in the audience of some of you and I realize some of you probably weren't born. I began writing was very demoralizing. But so I've been writing for quite a long time, and I do contemporary fiction and for New York City. So some of my stories, I don't want to use the term urban, but they're city stories, city-based stories. What I'm working on right now is a trilogy that I put together for Source Books Publishing. They came to me and said, "Give us an idea. We really want to work with you, but we want you to do a trilogy." So I came up with a theme called the Millionaires Club, and I won't take the time to explain what that's all about. But it's a common theme, millionaire, that runs through the three stories, although the three stories are all standalone. You don't have to read them in any particular order or one where it might be enough for you. But basically the theme is, it's about people, hero, heroines, whatever, who come into an inordinate amount of wealth, money that they didn't earn. So the question is, what do they do with it? Besides buying an island or a helicopter, so have an awful lot of money, what to do. So basically I decided that they have to be a little bit more thoughtful and philanthropic about having that kind of money, because there are a lot of people who have and a lot of people who have not. So I wanted to kind of explore that theme in my books. The first one, Winner Takes All, came out in April of 2021, and just it's not really a giveaway because the book is out. It was a lottery winner. That's the first thing that we think of. And the second one, which is available now for sale, and I know you're going to make a mad dash out the store to buy it as soon as I'm done, is called The Time of Your Life. The first book takes place in New York, born and raised. Second book in Washington, D.C. Third book coming out next year, which is already in the pipeline, is set in Los Angeles. So that's what I've been working on. And my stories, as I said, are contemporary. And when I first started writing, I began coming up with ideas for books that I didn't already see in a bookstore. I was a voracious reader. I think we all are. And I said, I don't see a story about this or a story about that. And so when I first started writing, it was really just for myself. I had absolutely no expectations of getting published. And my first book I wrote in about, 6 weeks. And it was over 100,000 words. So then, yeah, oh my God. So then as now, I believe that was a book that I was supposed to write, I was meant to write. And I did. It took me 15 years actually to get it published, but I think it was arguably my most acclaimed novel. It was very risky, very kind of forbidden and taboo at the time because it was an interracial story. And I felt that there was so much tension between, the minority communities, brown people, and police, that I said, well, what if I had a story in which the hero was not only white, but was a police officer, and he became friends with someone who was African American who worked in publishing. And they actually just started out being good friends, but of course the story is very complicated, and they became lovers and fell in love and all of that. And so I felt my responsibility as a writer, my first book, was to see, can I pull that off? Can I really pull people in and make them believe that this is actually possible? And so that was the first book I did. And as I said at the time, because it was considered such a taboo subject, we're kind of really past that right now in society. But it took me a while to get it published. But then when it did, I got a front page review on USA Today. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I just moved forward ever since then. Still here, still publishing. Thank you. So I think we're similar in age, so I won't go into that territory. I'm Loretta Chase. I'm currently working on my difficult Dukes series. I've been working on this what feels like most of my life. But it was it starting it during the pandemic. So that's part of the issue. But anyway, it's the second book of the series. The first one was a runway bride. And the second one was a my take on taming the shrew and who should have been tamed. And the third one's going to be dealing with a difficult marriage. So that's one.
I'm Janet Raye Stevens. I'm from just up the street in Worcester. I've been writing pretty much my whole life. I wrote my first story when I was 10 for a school assignment, and it was called The Day My Teacher Wore a Mini Skirt to School. You guess how old I am. My teacher was not amused. I also remember people laughing at it, so that was all the encouragement.
Yeah.
And moved on from there. And I've just been writing my whole life. I was a reporter for a while. I was writing for a little bit. And about 20 years ago, I started writing seriously for publication. And 20 years on, many, many rejections later, a couple of agents, I decided when the pandemic hit that I would just start independently publish. So I published 4 books in 2 years.
Wow.
And I write time travel set mostly in World War II and mid-century, a World War II set paranormal suspense, and the occasional Christmas romance. Everybody loves that.
Very true, very true. Amazing. So I think we'll kind of start at the beginning. Like, how do you go about creating these characters that you have, populating all your different stories? Do you start by knowing something about the characters? Do you start where you're like, oh, I want to write a mystery in World War II, and you figure out the characters? Do you even know anything about them when you start? Nothing's there.
Okay. I like to think of my stories, and I looked at it this way when I first began writing so many years ago. I call them what if stories or suppose stories. You know, what if you had this particular setting or circumstances, or suppose you had this particular setting or circumstances. So it's something that I want to explore. It could be a familial issue. It could be about friendship. It could be about society. I do put some social issues in some of my books, and I don't shy away from also doing racial issues, but I don't go into the trauma. These are supposed to be entertainment books. I just go in for exploring and raising questions and hoping that the readers will, figure out some of their own answers. So once I have a theme in mind that I want to cover, I then start asking myself, well, who's going to tell the story? And it's at that point that I began thinking about who's going to be the he and her in the story, and who are they? I can't remember the name of the character study that came out years ago that writers use to determine who the characters are. But things like hair color, how tall are they, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, where did they go to school, who's the best friend, that kind of thing. And I used to use that as a basis for beginning to build a human being in my mind. I don't need that resource anymore. But then once I have a sense of really, really knowing these characters to the point where I'm getting images of what they're going to look like, I am pretty much ready to start writing the book. I know how it's going to open almost always. I know how it's going to end almost always. And the middle part in between all the transitions, I have vague ideas of scenes and tensions and ups and downs, subject to change as you're actually writing. But the beginning and the ending is the most important thing to me because I know where I'm headed and I know where the characters are leading me, and they're talking in my head constantly anyway. So, sooner or later we all pull it together until we get to the end. So my characters come to me in different ways. The most recent series, and I should have mentioned the great historical RomCon, which I think gives me some leeway that I might not have if I were trying to write contemporary romances. But they come in different ways. And one good example is the hero of my most recently published book resulted from a photograph I saw of an Royal Air Force pilot. He was just stepping out of his plane and he's leaning forward and I said, this guy looks like trouble. And he just turned into a character in my mind and I could tell what he was thinking. And he starts out the first book in the series, even though he's not the hero of that book. And the second book, the first book in the series, the hero was really a kind of a result of the heroine. Because I'm like, okay, she is running away from this guy, and who's the guy that rescues her? And it's like his best buddy, who's used to having to clean up after his friend. And so they evolve in different ways. Sometimes a movie inspires me. And as I mentioned on that podcast, I saw The Mummy and I was like, oh, I can do that. And so I wrote the character for it. Not necessarily Brendan Fraser, although he was my mind, but kind of wild West kind of character who's just unafraid and is going to plunge. So for me, it's not a very consistent process because of the way I write, which is mostly intuitive. It just depends on the story. Lots of times, as you were saying, the story, sometimes the theme tells you the characters are better.
Speaking of Brendan Fraser, all of my heroes are pretty much across between Brendan Fraser, the Mummy hero, Nathan Fillion. So all they're all very broad shouldered, they're all kind of tough guys.
But a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, Firefly, there you go. They have a very soft marshmallow heart. Solid on the outside. But I pretty much kind of the same thing. Whatever the theme is of my story, the characters sort of develop from them. The way I write is, I'm sure you've all heard about the pantser versus plotter. I'm a plotter, so I write mostly mystery. There's a mystery in there. There's always a romance, of course, but so I'll have a plot that's the mystery plot, and I'll go from beginning to end, and I really have that all worked out. And then the characters sort of just tell me who they are as I'm writing the story. So that, because I like to make it very difficult for myself, so I always often have to go back and fill in the blanks. But so they sort of develop, those voices speak to me as I go along, and they become. But I usually pick some emotion that they have to face and learn to overcome. And so in my time travel series, Beryl Blue, the Time Cop, which I can tell you right now is a series. So the first book ends in a cliffhanger. Just in case you're interested in buying it, don't kill me. There will be a happy ending at the end, but you know, it's ups and downs. But so her parents are dead. She lost her grandmother at a young age. So she has fear of intimacy and fear of losing people. So when she time travels back to World War II and meets this soldier. She's told that she's the only one in all of time who can save the soul from an assassin, time traveling assassin. And of course, you know, she's a librarian from 2015. So, but you know, she starts to fall for this guy, but she's lost everyone she's lost. So she has a lot of fear, and she always runs away. And so it's all about her running away and trying to learn to overcome fear. So that's kind of how that developed. In my World War II said paranormal, A Moment After Dark. The people all have powers. They have all these abilities, sort of like X-Men in World War II is what I call it. And my heroine, Addie, has the ability to see the future with a touch. And she gets a glimpse of Pearl Harbor. And so she's like, I have to do something about this. This is really bad. And her power is based on fear. So when she gets a glimpse of the future, she never sees like somebody's, oh, I'm happy, a happy ending. She sees something really fearful. So that's where her power is built. And so that's how I made all of my characters in that book, where they were built on the emotions that fuel their powers. And the hero is a neutralizer. So he takes everybody else's emotions into himself and struggling with those. So, and the villain is very, very villainous.
And he or she should be.
Now, speaking of villains, is it more fun to write your heroes, or is it more fun to write the villains? And is it at all difficult going in and writing, oh, this is the bad guy and everyone's gonna hate them? Is it hard to put someone on the page, or is that like the joy?
Well, I never call the opposing character villain or someone who's really despicable. I don't want to deal with despicable. And they are much more challenging and much more interesting to write because of what their personality, the base of their personality really is. And if I'm going to put someone in there that's maybe not quite so likable or suspicious of him, part of my challenge and part of what I enjoy is just subtly having him shift, having him pivot, so that you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a good guy under there somewhere. And maybe you're not going to fall in love with him, but you realize he has a value, or she has a value, and they're redeemable. And I think that is a great balance for a hero or a heroine who we think of as being intrinsically good. They may have problems, they may have issues, there may be things that they're trying to overcome, but they have to be sympathetic characters if they're the lead of the story, so that they keep you with them throughout the story, because you want to find out how their story is going to end. But the challenge to them is sometimes it's a best friend or an ex-husband or an ex-wife or a boss or whatever it happens to be. They are challenging characters to write, and I do enjoy that because I have to give them a little bit of extra oomph, so that you don't just throw the book across the room and say, I'm not saying this person.
I think villains can be very complex characters, and they can be very interesting to write about. And I found in the stories that mine vary. Some of them are pretty bad, but then some of them have redeeming qualities. It really depends on the story and the balance of the characters. As you were saying, the hero and heroine are up against this person. What are the hero and heroine's personalities? And what's going to work well in making their life difficult? How is this person going to make their life difficult? But I've also written a couple of books that didn't really have a bad guy, didn't really have a bad villain. And one thing I've shied away from is I don't like to make women on a story. I've read stories like that, not necessarily romances. It bothers me because it seems like that's just kind of anti-feminist a little bit. So my bad guys are usually guys, but some of them are not as bad as others. And yeah, it depends on who the other characters are and what the story is. Sometimes you need a really bad guy, and sometimes you just need someone who's very sweet.
Yeah. That's the perfect description, because, in Moment After Dark, my World War II suspense, the bad guy is a rotten Nazi spy. So, he's a bad guy. There's no redeeming qualities to this guy. But I like that, I'd like to give my villains, or people who are just not quite in the hero and heroine's corner, a lot of nuance. So,
Yeah, nuance though in this, well, that's kind of, absolutely. So you guys were talking about during your process, having the characters kind of talking to you, do they ever take you in like a surprising direction that you weren't expecting their personalities to go or their journeys to go? Like you get them on the page and they just take over, or do you're in charge the whole time?
Well, forget about being part.
Yeah.
And I think about early in my career when I was plotting out stories and working on things, and I knew where the story was going to go or what I wanted to have happen. And I'd write a scene, or I'd do a scene of dialogue, interaction between two characters. And I'd finish it and go back and read it a day or two later, and this is not working. There's something wrong here because it's just not gelling and it's not making me feel, you got it, this is fine, now you can move on. And it took me a while to realize that the characters were basically saying, I would never do that, or I would never say that. And I would just have to bite the bullet, and I don't scrap anything. I just sort of cut it out and put it in another file and save it. Never know when you can use it again. And I realized I had to think more about who the characters are. What was their motivation in that particular part of the story? So going back to the characters, because it's their stories, I have to think about what their thought process, not mine, not where I think I want them to go, but what they're telling me that I am intuitively picking up on is the way to do that scene or to do the dialogue. So there have been times when I've had to go back to a chapter, sometimes rewrite the whole chapter or rewrite a whole scene. And then I know it works because I know where it all is coming from. The characters tell you because it all comes from motivation. And you don't know the motivation unless you know the characters. So it's kind of like a little cycle. Everything comes back to the characters. And once I finally learned that lesson, it became much less of me trying to force them to go one way in the story because that's the way I had written my synopsis, and realize this is right. This is the point where you're just hands off. Okay, let me just listen. Let me pay attention, and you get on the right road, and the story then moves much more sensible and for the characters. Again, I learned a long time ago that I'm just a scribe. I'm just, tell me what you want me to do. And I write it down. The characters are puppets.
Yeah, that's so true. I would love them to be puppets. They refuse to be puppets. And the book that I've been struggling with the last couple of years, that's been the problem.
Yeah.
They would not talk to me. They would not tell me what was going on with them. They're just sullen, silent, won't speak to each other, won't speak to me. Very frustrating. But I have had that same experience where I have written a synopsis and I thought that's where things are going to go, but the characters are not happy. And it sounds so mystical when it doesn't. Really. But that's if something in your brain knows what's going to be true about those characters. And until you find the truth, you can't make them do what you want them to. You could try, but it looks like crap. So, and it's crap.
When I first was writing Beryl Blue Time Cop, I had that same situation where it was like, well, I wanted her to be some way, she's fearful or whatever. And then all of a sudden she just turned into this snark monster. And I was like, that's me. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm letting myself out here. So she just became very, very snarky. And I had so much fun with it, so that's one of the beauties of that.
That's right.
Characters. I'm working on the third book in the Beryl Blue series right now, and I had this scene that they were time traveling somewhere, and then they're going to time travel somewhere else, and I was like, I got to get the scene in here to introduce so and so or whatever, and I was just struggling so hard to make that scene work. And then I finally had to give it up because it was like, I'll just get to the next time jump that they're going on. And then I realized the only reason I was really struggling to get this scene to work was because my hero, Sully, when they Beryl always, whenever she time travels, she always flops under the ground. She's a very poor time traveler. But Sully, his first time time traveling, he comes out in superhero pose, you know, knee on the ground, fist to the ground, and ready to fight. And it was like, that was the only reason I was struggling to push that, because I wanted that Sully to have that moment, you know, and then it was like, I can't do it. That doesn't work for the story. I'll have to find somewhere.
Absolutely. I think we're at a good point now where we're going to take some questions from the audience. And people that have microphones, so if you want to raise your hand, she'll come on by and we can get some questions going. Yeah, I think there's one closer and then we'll continue on the front.
I think as a reader, we're probably all familiar with reading for a few years, starting to realize that you're kind of drawn to the same plot over and over again, or the same archetype over and over again, and realizing that you're sort of satisfying something in yourself by reading a similar arc or story over and again. I'm wondering if any of you have had the experience of writing something and realizing, oh, this is a story that I need to tell over and over again, or an issue I need to revisit for myself.
Well, first of all, I don't like repeating stories. I don't like repeating something that I have already covered. Unless there is something that's a unique twist on it that makes it uniquely different. And that comes around in terms of the theme in the book rather than anything to do with the characters themselves. But I have to say that honestly, I worked during my entire career to not copy something that I've already covered and done. Particularly if it's a very specific kind of theme or subject. And if I finish the book and I'm happy with how it came out, I have accomplished my goal in, resolving that particular question or theme or issue, I'm ready to move on to something else. The only time I might revisit it is if I suddenly realize, well, you didn't talk about this aspect, or what about if this happened instead of that? And then I say, okay, that's a different story. And then I'll have to come up with a different setting, different characters, different emotional sections for them, parts of their personality, in order to explore that other new element that I hadn't done in the first book. But for the most part, I don't go back to subjects I've already done.
There's a consistent theme in my books. I don't know what it is. I'm not that self-aware. No, I really, that would be, I get bored with things, it's like, okay, I've done that one. And it's like, probably not going to write each story. And the challenge is you want to tackle something new. And see if you can approach it in a different way. There's also a challenge trying to make sure your characters don't always have the same quirks. That's challenging. But in terms of the overall story, I'm always drawn to what's the next thing. What can I do next? What can I try? What book from the 19th century that I don't approve of the way they handle the women can I rewrite? Or how about Shakespeare? I'm not afraid. I'll do it. That's I think that's part of the joy of discovery. Exactly. Yeah, you find something new.
And challenge yourself.
Yes.
Well, I guess I do have a theme, and it is usually overcoming, it's a lot of things. Stephen King, his famous thing is he writes what scares him, so it's like, I kind of write about the things that scare me too, and trying to, find the courage to move forward and overcome fear. But I do it in a funny way, so.
So we had a question right in the front.
Yeah, so I have thank you. So I have 12 questions for you. I was wondering if you could talk about the development of side characters. And so many times in romance novels, there's the hero and the heroine, and they're so colored by their interactions with side characters. And I was wondering about the process of developing those and do they come to you as clearly as the hero and the heroine do, or is it something that you kind of tease out, or are you basing it on, other people, or is it kind of a natural development, or can you talk about the process of it?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think the secondary characters are important because they're sort of a counterpoint to the main characters. And I'm not talking necessarily, evil villain or controversial, anything like that. I think you need to have a balance. One of the things that used to bother me when I began writing these novels is that the hero and the heroine never seemed to be connected to anybody. There was never anything about the families, the best friends, school. Every single chapter was about him and her together trying to build this relationship. And I'm thinking, well, where's the family? Where are the co-workers? Where are the enemies? So the secondary characters for me are very, very important. In my current book, The Time of Your Life, the heroine has a sister, a younger sister that she actually kind of raised because her parents died when she was about 19, 20, and her sister was about 15, 16. So she actually became a surrogate mother pretty young. And so now they're both adults, they have careers and all of that. But she still has this kind of motherly, maternal, hanging over protectiveness towards her sister, except that her sister doesn't need that anymore. And they have to figure out how to, cut the umbilical cord, so to speak. So the sisters' relationship to each other is very important, and it plays into the story. Whereas the heroine, the hero in the book, had a tragedy in his past involving a sibling. I don't want to say any more about that. But whether the characters actually in the book or in the case of the hero not in the book physically, it plays into their development as a human being, as a character, as an adult, and how they resolve the emotional issues that they had when they were much younger. So the secondary characters can be very, very important. On the other hand, I had one book in which I did such a good job on a secondary character who was not a good guy that I realized there was a possibility of him overtaking the main protagonist in the book. So I had to cut him back a little bit and just put him back in his place so that, so he wouldn't take it over. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he needs to have his own story. And I decided, no. Never gonna be a good guy. I'm not gonna go there.
I think the secondary characters give you a way of making more three-dimensional your main characters, because they're reflecting, they're coming, that there's an exchange. I have and also it's like an outside perspective, and it kind of sometimes it's for humorous effect, but I feel like people need friends, and whether they're like useful friends or not useful friends, it says something about the main character, who the secondary character is towards them. And right now I'm thinking about some of the guys I do who are not too swift, who are the secondary characters, but they say something about the main character. And they seem to come very easily, much more easily sometimes than the main character, but they also help me get to the character.
Yeah. Pretty much what they say. I do have, with my Very Little Time Cop series, I love the old 1940s, 1930s, 40s movies with the banter and all of the characters. There's always some dotty mother, who's a little wacky. And so I tried to like add in that flavor, in that, and having, I have one character who's like a little chatterbox, and every time she's on screen, on the page, she's just like, she's very funny. But I do think that it is good for that, and also provides a commentary on, oh, I noticed that you two are looking at each other all the time. So, there's somebody who notices they're falling in love, even if they don't know they're falling.
We'll take more questions.
I think this is the person that came out of Loretta talking about having trouble getting the characters to come to her. When that happens, is there anything that you do to try to get them to talk to you, or is it a matter of just waiting? Is that for me? I think something like that for the answer. If I did, the book would have been finished. Yeah. When I run into trouble like that, and you're listening for the characters to talk to you or take an action or whatever. For me, it always means going back to who are the characters? What is it about them that I don't know? So they're not able to talk to me, or they're sort of waiting for me to figure it out. So there have been times when I would literally go back and review who the people are that I made up, because they're your characters. They don't exist except in your story. So it's up to you to figure it out. And so I'll go back and rethink their characteristics. What are their strengths, their weaknesses? What are the things that they're afraid of? What are their triumphs, the things that they've overcome? What are they trying to overcome now? And I think if I begin to think about the characters and who they are, what constitute them as people, then I begin to relax, and then they begin to open up to me. And they always do eventually. But I've also learned not to try to force it, because that will drive you crazy. Yeah. I mean, that is, I'm going to do this, I have until 10 o'clock tonight, and I'm going to figure out what it is they're trying to say to me. You can't do that. This is not a marathon. Things have to happen kind of intuitively and organically, and or it's not going to work. And I think as writers, we know that. So I have those little tools that I pull out and go back to in order to have the characters give me another chance. I'm waiting, I'm listening. I know who you are. I'm pretty sure I know who you are. And then eventually they open up and they will talk to you. But I think we're really kind of intuitive about it. You just have to listen and pay attention and follow your own way of dealing with it. But there is always a way of dealing with it.
Yeah. I deal with it in one of three ways. I take a shower. Because whenever I'm in the shower, always like the entire book comes to me, every character line comes to me. And of course, I forget most of them by the time I get out, but that helps. I watch Casablanca, which is my favorite movie. And that always just inspires me and gives me you just see something new every time. Yeah. That helps to inspire me. The third thing is I write short stories also, mostly mystery short stories. I usually have a little romance in those too. I squeeze the romance within the killing and the kissing. And so when I'm having trouble on something novel, I'm going to just turn to one of the short stories that I'm working on, and that sometimes will, I'll be working on the mystery or whatever, and then I can go back to my novel.
Oh, great. It looks like we have time for one last audience question. If we can up there.
Have you ever been surprised by the audience character that you guys or you thought was one way, and then the way readers received that person was completely different?
Yes. Particularly when I read reviews, and I'm thinking, what happened to me? So yes, that does happen, but then it does make me pause, because someone has clearly read the book, at least I hope they had, and they had an opinion or something to say about a particular character. So now I'm asking myself, well, what is it that I wrote that made them feel that way? That this is what they came away with from the character. And then I think, no, I didn't do that. So something else is going on here. But it does make you stop and think, because you'd like to feel that whether you like the book or not, they at least got the story. They sort of knew what you were trying to do or what hopefully you have done. But sometimes a reader I'll get feedback in which it's clear that what they have done, it seems to me, is projected onto my characters, either something that they like or don't like, or something that they are actually personally dealing with. And that's kind of hard to deal with. It's not that it's hard to deal with, but you have to be able to recognize that that's what's happening, and also not take personally, and not become defensive too much about what someone has said. Because, we all have different backgrounds and different histories and different things that we're dealing with. You bring all of that to all of your experiences, whether you're reading a book or watching a movie. You're going to be interjecting and imposing on the characters and your own opinion, your own history. And I think that's kind of unavoidable. It's not unavoidable. So, yes, it does happen. I do tend to be a little bit surprised when I'm first reading it and I begin to frown and sort of my head goes to the side, thinking, really? I don't think that that's what my intention was, and I don't think that's what I actually put into the book. But I've learned to be a lot kinder about the review process, because people are going to come at the story differently. Just as a quick little aside before I let Loretta say, and Winner Takes All, which was book one of my trilogy, there was the scene towards the end of the book where the hero, who was the one who won an obscene amount of money in the lottery, and he's divorced, and at the end he does something for his ex-wife, and they did not part amicably, but he did something for her that I thought that as a guy and hero, it was something he would do to help her out, and it was financial. Well, I got this review back on Amazon from a reader who gave it a 1 star because she didn't feel the hero should have done anything for his ex-wife. Yeah. It happens. I don't read it. My time I read it is if my publisher says something. I just don't have that experience. No, I don't, because I don't read. Makes me a happier person. I just read them a long time ago. As you said, they come to it with their own worlds and their own attitudes, and you have no control over that. All you would do is write the best and not write and put it out there. Right. Yeah.
Are you surprised that Jessica and Dane are the couple that have had the longest, like had the biggest impact, I guess?
Yes.
So people are still talking about that age.
Yeah.
Like of all the couples that you've written,
Yeah.
that's the one that
That's the one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful, but yeah.
Yeah.
I can't say I don't have as many reviews as you both, and I haven't really gotten any of that. I don't read the reviews either, especially if they're full of,
Yeah.
But I haven't really been surprised by what people have said, but I have been pleased by, I've had several people react to my hero in the Time Cop series, Sully, and say how much they love him. I wanted to make him larger than life hero, so I mean, I'm glad that they love him. Many people have said, I love Sully, don't kill him. I'm like, well, okay. That'll be different.
Well, thank you everybody for being a wonderful audience. Thank you all for being amazing panelists. You have the book sales outside, so now they've heard about the wonderful stories, you can go get them for yourselves. And they're gonna do, obviously, inside today with the weather, the discussions in the book time will be upstairs. But that's our time here today, so thank you, everybody, for being part. Thank you.